If you ever get that simultaneous chord in your heart and in your groin that says, humma, humma, I've got to meet this guy, that's what overcame me. Hi, this is Mike Balaban. Welcome to another episode of BAMMER Tales. Today I'd like to share with you the story of one of, if not the most idyllic vacation romances I've ever had. As you know from my many episodes on here and my stories on Instagram, I've had quite a number of romances while traveling. After all, it's been 40 plus years that I've been doing this. But some of them are most memorable and stand out more than others. And the one that I want to share with you today was the one between me and Gary Matthews, a Welsh or British hairstylist from London who I met on the beach in Mykonos, that scenic, beautiful, popular Greek island in the Aegean Sea. I had been there for the first time in 1983 by myself. I was adopted on that trip by a group of Alitalia Italian airline flight attendants who kind of looked after me. But otherwise, I really didn't know anybody. In fact, one of the photos we'll share today is of a group of German drag queens that came down onto the beach one day, all dressed in their regalia, wearing heels and dresses and necklaces, and proceeded to have a mock beauty contest on the beach on beach mats in front of an entire regimen of beachgoers and tourists there in the nude watching this all unfold. It was quite a memory, and the photos I snapped some of them are almost like paintings more than photos, and it's something that people comment on even today. That was 1983. Then in 1985, I went back to Mykonos, this time with several friends, and I met others while I was there and expanded my groups of friends from the New York area particularly. And while there, what you do in Mykonos, it was a very popular island even back then, but much more rustic, not expensive at all the way it is today. Today it's the jet set island. Back then it was a very commoner island. Everybody went, but it was not about fancy hotels. What happened was you would go to the harbor and catch one of these fishing boats with the captains who made their living driving or motoring their little boats out around this point to one of three beaches and dropping off the people on the boats at the different beaches and then picking them up later when they wanted to return to town. And while you were on the beach, there was a beach called Paradise that was for families, Super Paradise that was gays, and then Elia, which was a kind of a progressive anything goes beach. The latter two were more nude than not, but anybody could sunbathe there, clothed or unclothed. And in the course of the early afternoon, I noticed a really handsome, buff, blonde, probably in his late 20s, maybe 30 years old, on a towel by himself, not too far away. And I was just struck by his beauty. And when you get that simultaneous feeling in your heart and in your groin where you just have to meet someone, well, that's what happened to me. And I know it probably seems like I'm pretty practiced and comfortable at finding ways to meet people like that in situations like that, but far from it. And particularly at that time, I was really kind of shy about initiating contacts that I thought might be sexual or romantic. If it was just friendship, I had no problem. Somehow, though, I made my way over to his towel and struck up a conversation, and he was receptive. He was very friendly. He invited me to move my things to his towel, and I lay down there with him, and we chatted. And within the course of an hour, we were entwined with each other physically. So clearly the attraction was mutual and immediate. And we were kissing and making out and just, everything you do when you're infatuated with someone in the first hour or two. And I have photos which you can see on the screen that I took that day. And in one of them, the photographer was taking a picture of the two of us, and Gary was trying to pull down my dolphin short gym shorts. just as a joke to show my crotch to the camera. And I was resisting him with all my might. And the main reason why I was petrified of being exposed at that moment was I was experiencing a hard-on, and that would have appeared on camera. So Gary and I spent 2 or 3 hours on the beach and then decided we wanted to go back, and probably unspoken was have sex with each other. But we got on the boat and we rode back, and my memory of that ride was how romantic it was, and I've got a photo or two to share of that. And we then walked through town and out up the hill to where my motel-like accommodations were, and I had a room with a balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea. And I gave him a drink. We went out on the balcony. We finished our drinks, and he started to disrobe with the idea that we were going to have sex. And I've always had the presence of mind to know that I want to remember this moment visually. And I stopped him and said, "Would you mind if I took photos of you undressing?" And he was game for it. He didn't care, which is one reason why I feel comfortable sharing these photos. Again, blurred when it comes to crotch, but otherwise photos of him naked today. I have about a dozen of those photos, and you can enjoy them here. And we ended up having the most wonderfully romantic and simultaneously torrid time on that deck at sunset as the red orb sank behind the horizon and as we screwed. And I have photos to remind me of it, and it was the apotheosis of that vacation. We ended up spending the next 3 or 4 days together hanging out. It was wonderfully romantic. He spent time with me and my friends. We spent time alone. We went to the few bars there were. We hung out at the beach. And then came time to separate. And Gary went back to England, and I went back to New York. We remained in contact pretty regularly, and eventually made plans to meet up in Key West, Florida, which is another gay resort, the following Halloween in 1986. And he came along this time with 2 or 3 of his mates from London. And I don't remember a lot of that vacation except that it was fun, and we went to all the Bourbon Street gay neighborhood bars, and had great food and had sex, of course, again. And Gary had put on about 15 pounds intentionally of muscle weight, working out a lot, probably taking steroids, although I can't vouch for that. And personally, I preferred him looking more svelte and slender, though muscular, the way he had in 1985. But I still cared for him and didn't mind the fact that he'd changed his body shape. And we had those 4 or 5 days together, and then he returned home to England again. And I went back to New York. And we stayed in touch for a while after that, but then something happened. I mean, nothing specific. We didn't have a falling out. I didn't lose interest in him, nor do I think he lost interest in me, but we just stopped communicating. And then when I went back to try to find him, I wasn't able to a couple of years later. And it's now been 38 years. And of course, my memories of that trip and the photos depicting it are vivid. And it's one of my fondest memories. But I've been unable to locate him. Now, I have to admit, the thought has crossed my mind a number of times. He was an out, very active gay man and hair salon stylist, which is a pretty easy role to be in, or position to be in, where you might or might not be promiscuous. And it was a time when that was commonplace. It was standard. And then AIDS had come along. And there's a very good possibility he didn't survive the epidemic. I hope I'm wrong. So in the last few years, I've redoubled my efforts, and I've enlisted a cadre of my followers on Instagram who've also helped, particularly in England, to try to see if any of us can find him. Again, he's got a pretty common name, Gary Matthews, for a place like England. And no one has been able to locate him. One person did find someone who looked like it could be him, and I direct messaged that person on Instagram and asked if he was the Gary that met me in 1985, and I've never heard back, even though I sent a couple of messages. So I'm probably just going to have to be content with my memories, although boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if in fact he came out of the woodwork and we reconnected, because I like to keep continuity with all my ex-lovers and ex-affairs, as you will know by now. So that's my story with Gary. Mykonos at the time was charming and magical and stunningly beautiful. Today, it's become a very expensive resort for the high-end gay, or straight. So I haven't returned since 1993 and don't plan to. I'm looking for other places that are kind of like the new Mykonos to go to, and I have some of those in mind. If you're interested, contact me and I'll tell you which ones they are. Thanks a lot for listening. This has been another episode of BAMMER Tales. I'm Mike Balaban. Goodbye.